You were knocked out in the second round of voting last week. Were you disappointed not to get further?
Of course, I was disappointed. I was in it to win it. But listen, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude and privilege at having had the chance to run to be the next Prime Minister. And I was incredibly honoured to share a platform with a really wide range of excellent candidates. I really felt proud to be a Conservative this week.
And you're now backing Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary. Why have you thrown your weight behind her?
I've worked very closely with Liz for several years, actually, most recently in relation to Ukraine and the very robust action that she's taken in terms of sanctions and in foreign policy, a tough line on Putin. She's by far the most qualified for this job out of all of the candidates. And that plus her vision for the country. She wants to cut taxes. She's unapologetic about that. She knows that families and businesses are crying out for that help around the country. And she's got a really inspiring vision for the British people. So for me, that's a very winning formula.
But you've now said that you think that Kemi Badenoch should actually drop out and throw her support behind Liz Truss. I mean, you weren't prepared to do that. Why do you think she should?
Well, I haven't said that she should drop out. I've just looked at the numbers, and what I've urged, colleagues to think about tomorrow when we go back into the ballot boxes is who can really win on a centre-right, tax-cutting, common sense agenda. And on the numbers, it's Liz. And that's why I would urge my colleagues to really think about that. We need to get Liz into the final two. If she's in the final two, she'll be able to win amongst members. And I'm afraid no one else really can match that objective.
We need to back the one who can make it. Liz can, Kemi cannot. Isn't that, though, perhaps a bit patronising towards Kemi Badenoch, who's run a pretty impressive campaign?
Not at all. I have immense respect for Kemi. She's a great friend of mine and she is running a brilliant campaign. And I'm sure she's going to be a brilliant Prime Minister one day. But, in terms of experience, I think, we've got someone who's a serving foreign secretary, someone who's led several departments, someone who's been at the forefront of actual decision making on the world stage. I think that is an important qualification. Whoever's going to become Prime Minister is going to be inheriting big challenges. They can't afford the time to strip things back down and work out how it all works. They've got to hit the ground running. And Liz Truss, for me, is the person who can do that.
So are you part of the Stop Rishi campaign then?
I'm not part of any stop campaign. As I said, I think all the candidates are brilliant in their own right. I'm here, as Liz is, to run a positive campaign, focusing on the merits of her policy platform, that being cutting taxes, taking a common sense approach to identity politics, a real priority for me. She knows what a woman is, I think, which is becoming worryingly rare these days in political debate. And she's just announced a really important policy development on housing targets. I was a planning barrister for a few years before I was an MP, and I know that we have got to a position now where we've got top-down targets which are blighting communities, denying local people a say on what is built in their local areas without any recognition for the impact on infrastructure, on local services. And I think her announcement today is really welcome.
Lots of different policies to talk about. Tax cuts have been absolutely central to the debate. Liz Truss promised about £30 billion worth of tax cuts in the debate on Friday night. Isn't that irresponsible? Isn't that exactly the fairy tale that Rishi Sunak has been warning about?
No, not at all. I think Liz has worked in the Treasury at a senior position, and when she says she wants to cut taxes, I entirely agree with her.
But that means more borrowing, doesn't it?
Not necessarily entirely based on more borrowing. I think there will be a bit more borrowing, but we will be able to grow our way out of the issue, because I think to afford tax cuts, we know that when we cut taxes, there is more investment by the private sector, there are more jobs, there is more return to the exchequer.
And a real risk of more
revenue.
inflation too.
Well, when it comes to cutting inflation, I know that Liz is very passionate about cutting government spending, and that's another way to pay for tax cuts. Our state is far too bloated, far too inefficient, and far too costly. There are so many areas where we can trim down the costs incurred by state decisions and state spending. And I know Liz is very, very focused on looking closely at that.
You mentioned the issue of the rights of women and of transgender people. You've criticised Penny Mordaunt for her stance on trans rights. We've had these documents unveiled in the Sunday Times today. I mean, it's a complex process, isn't it, for somebody who is going through this process, wants to change gender. Penny Mordaunt has been clear that she never accepted or supported self-identification. Do you accept that?
I don't really know what happened in relation to that particular policy relating to Penny. So forgive me, I'm not going to comment too much on the disputed recollections by various people, but I very much note there are two sides to the story. My view of Liz is that she's unambiguous about saying no to self-identification, and she's unambiguous about protecting single-sex spaces for women. I know she also shares my views about trans ideology or gender ideology in schools, and she wants to take a firm line on that. My personal experience in this flows from last year. I was a cabinet minister who was about to have a baby, and I was very honoured that a bill was passed in Parliament, introduced by the government, to allow me to take maternity leave, because it was a first for British history. Penny Mordaunt was the bill minister in relation to passing that legislation. And my recollection is that the wording in that bill described me as a pregnant person. I found that pretty offensive and pretty dispiriting. It was denying my womanhood and the innate feminine trait of being able to bear a child. And that wording was fiercely opposed in the Commons. It was fiercely opposed in the Lords. Hansard makes it very clear what Penny's view was. She resisted changing that wording. She wanted the words pregnant person. She resisted the inclusion of the word woman. And it was only after sustained opposition that she was forced to concede and accept on a compromise of the word mother.
So do you think she's too woke to lead the Conservative Party in the country?
My view of Penny is that she is woke, yes.
And is that a problem for the Conservative Party still?
Listen, there's a diversity of views in the Conservative Party. I have no disrespect to her for her woke views, but I think we should call it out for what it is. I think the track record speaks for itself. And Hansard, I invite you to look at the debates of late February, early March of last year, which make clear that the resistance was very strong from Penny Mordaunt, who was the relevant minister. I have a very high opinion of Penny, I have to say. I think she's a remarkable lady. She's a constituency neighbour of mine. She's a very effective local politician and been an effective minister. But I disagree with her on her views on trans ideology, gender ideology, and the definition of a woman.
There's been quite a lot of focus on this issue and on tax, but we are about to hit an extreme heat health alert. The first time we've ever had a national emergency declared for the high temperatures we're expecting. The environment has hardly been mentioned in this contest so far. We've now got Alok Sharma, who played a hugely important role at the COP26 conference, saying that he would resign from his position, and he's still leading the negotiations after that conference, unless he sees firmer commitments. Now, all we've heard so far is people talking about mitigating some of the costs of going green. Isn't that a mistake? Liz Truss, who you're supporting, is talking about getting rid of some of the green levies on fuel. Surely that is going in the wrong direction, given the scale of the crisis that we face.
No, it isn't. We all agree that there is a climate challenge. We all agree that we are not taking our environment seriously enough. And we all agree that we can all take more measures to protect our environment. I'm very, very clear about that for my part. However, I do believe that the costs of these measures on ordinary families, on businesses, have now become punitive. And I do think the pace at which some of these taxes, these green levies, and some of these burdens are being imposed on families are badly timed. And therefore, I do think we have to look at the net zero target. I do think we have to look at our route to get there. And I do think we have to rebalance and clarify that we've got a cost of living challenges for many families. And actually, I think we can get there in a more sustainable way, which doesn't punish or put punitive or prohibitive costs on families and businesses.
So when you say you'd look again at the net zero target, do you think it's a mistake to try and hit net zero by 2050? Would you scrap that?
My personal view is I would scrap that target. Yes, I'm not the candidate for Prime Minister and I'm not running this campaign. I support Liz's view, which is that the target should stay in place, but how we get there is it should be under review. And therefore, I agree with Liz when she says that we should remove or at least pause the green levies which are currently in place.
But if you pause the policies which should get you to net zero, there's no point in having a target, is there?
No, not necessarily. There are many other ways in which the market may respond. We need to provide incentives, financial incentives, to all of the other industries which will get us to net zero in a cleaner way. Solar, wind, nuclear. We need to look at options like fracking. Those are areas which haven't yet really been exploited sufficiently, to my mind. And I think that if we incentivize that sector to make the relevant investments, to upscale, to get the technology in place, then we will be able to bring to market those companies. It will be the private sector, effectively. The private sector will be able to bring to market good products, affordable products, importantly, that will not pose extreme financial burdens on millions of households around the country.
For many people, this extreme heat alert, the cost of living crisis are the real concerns that they have. How damaging do you think it is that the Conservative Party is going to go through weeks of this internal contest to choose the next leader, with a lot of sniping going along, a lot of insults being hurled on all sides?
Listen, this is the democratic process, and democracy always takes time. And I wouldn't want to curtail that process in the name of convenience. It's right that MPs have a say. It's right that our members have a say. So I actually think the schedule for choosing the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, it strikes the right balance. Luckily, we've got a summer recess. So actually, by the time term starts again in September, we will have a new Prime Minister. I think that's an incredibly swift process, particularly when you compare it to other parties. The Labour Party, by its standard process, takes at least double that amount of time. So I think that our party, being the most successful political party in British history, is quite expert at finding a new leader in difficult times. And I'm very pleased with the pace at which this is going. And I have to pay tribute to our party chairman and all the staff at CCHQ for delivering so far, and I'm sure in the future, a very professional process.
And we've got another key moment tonight, the next leadership contest. These things do matter, don't they? Because people who have votes will be watching. MPs who have a vote will know what their constituents are thinking and what their party members are thinking, who, of course, get the vote in the next round. Your favoured candidate, Liz Truss, was seen as a bit wooden and robotic in that debate. I won't repeat some of the insults that have been repeated from various people anonymously in all the papers about her performance. But, I mean, she's got to loosen up a bit, hasn't she, tonight?
Listen, I've worked with Liz. I've seen her in cabinet. I've worked closely with her in public-facing events, and she's an experienced person. She's a serious person. My view of that last debate was actually not focused on the style, but actually on the substance. And for me, it was between Rishi and Liz. They stood out by miles of the other candidates with serious, detailed analysis and solutions of the current economic challenges, of the current climate challenges. And it wasn't platitudes, it was detail. And that's what I'm looking for in a leader. I'm not actually interested in the spin and the style. I want someone who knows their stuff.
But the polls afterwards showed that she did probably the worst of any of them.
I also would, treat with caution some of these TV debates. They're really helpful and they're a useful tool in this process. But as I say, what one candidate says in the glare of a TV studio with quite limited time, in quite forced conditions, I don't think actually reflects their work ethic, what they actually know, what their policy platform is. I mean, we only saw, 1% of what the candidates really thought about really important issues like housing or Brexit or immigration. None of those topics were covered. So I think it's a very superficial analysis, and I think we should treat them with caution. But for my part, I actually thought Liz was the standout candidate.
I'm going to bring in Daisy McAndrew.
Good morning to you, Suella. I just want to pick you up on something you said early in your chat there with Carol. You said that this contest has made you proud to be Conservative this week. But if you look at the papers today, they are full of smears and stories, sort of backbiting in and amongst the candidates. And in fact, Penny Mordaunt has been saying this morning, we all know what's going on. This is the type of toxic politics we want to get away from. And if you just have a look at some of the tweets and texts that we've been getting here on Times Radio this morning, really criticising you for concentrating on this issue of gender and wokeness. And you have been saying a number of times this morning that Penny Mordaunt is too woke. This contest has got very dirty.
Well, I disagree with you, Daisy. I mean, I've answered a question that I was asked. I didn't lead with the gender stuff. I was asked that by Carol. I've got to answer it. And if I weren't to answer it, you would criticise me for not answering a question. So I'm going to answer questions that I'm asked. And I also think, again, that leads to my second point, the media have a massive role to play here. You probably won't publish the very kind comments I've made about Penny today. She's a brilliant politician. She's been a skillful minister, and I have a lot of respect for her. That's not going to be aired anywhere, I'm sure of it. What you'll probably focus on is what I've said when I disagree with her view. So I do think the media loves all of the disagreement and the dispute within the party. And actually, there's a huge amount of common ground. We're ultimately all on the same team. I stand by what I said, which is any one of them would make a brilliant prime minister. I'd be honoured to serve in their team with the utmost loyalty. And I'm very proud to be a Conservative. The talent, the meritocratic process that we have, the diversity of views and backgrounds, I think reflects a forward-looking, progressive, welcoming Conservative Party, and I'm really proud of everybody.
I'm just going to push you a little bit further on this issue of woke, because one of the issues that, again, a lot of our listeners are saying is, why is the Conservative Party concentrating so hard on this issue? Well, there was a poll out last week that said it ranked number 27 as the most important issue for your membership. And yet again and again, it's all about this issue of woke and gender.
Well, again, I put it back onto you. I mean, the question I was asked at the top of the show was about gender ideology. I'm going to answer the question I'm given. But I actually disagree with you. I think this debate is heavily focused primarily on the economy. The pragmatic and ideological and philosophical fissures in the party and the view on tax cuts, I think, has dominated this debate, and rightly so. I stood on a platform of taking a tough line on immigration and human rights, and I think that was an issue, and that's actually why I did it, because I wanted to ventilate that issue. And Brexit, I mean, Brexit is also the dominant issue. So I think the cost of living and the economy have actually been the dominant issues in this debate, rightly so. But I also know, in my role as a local MP, that people do worry about what's going on in their schools. People do worry about single-sex spaces for women. People do worry about, minority militant groups taking over parts of our public institutions. So I do think it's right that the Conservative Party, particularly in this context, tackles this issue head on. But no, I don't think it's the front and centre of anyone's campaign.
Suella Braverman, great to speak to you this morning. Thank you very much indeed.